how would you like to be introduced when we get going here?
As somebody who's quit his job essentially to fight these guys. I mean, I should have been working and doing my normal things. All right.
Okay, so I believe we're live. Um, Hello and welcome to another episode of Chatter. Today I have the pleasure of being joined by Sanjeev Sabhlok, who is a previous guest on the show and a former employee of the Australian government. Sanjeev, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Josh, for having me again.
Not a problem. It's great to have you back. It's yeah, a real pleasure to be able to chat to you whilst whilst there's all these crazy things going on. I sometimes I can't believe what we're actually going through. Um, it's
Yes, it
it's
is difficult. Yes.
it's very difficult to try and like wrap my head around that we're at this stage now. So um, I guess the first thing that I'd like to get into is this the protest that we're now seeing online, that started with the construction workers. Is this the first like major protest that we're seeing in Australia? And if so, why do you think it took so long? And what was the tipping point of people that sort of made them jump to doing this essentially?
Well, obviously, this is not the first, protests. In fact, I think it's definitely the biggest one so far. So as far as the word major goes, I suppose this does qualify as the biggest, the recent last couple of weeks. But these protests started very early. They started pretty much in around August last year, or even in July last year, I think. That's when the first police brutalities started, where a policeman, for example, you might have seen the image. It's now pretty outdated, but still there. A woman who's walking on the road and without a mask. She actually had a mask exemption, turned out later, but she was obviously had a bit unclear about what's happening, and so the police person basically seemed to have choked her on the neck. Oh. And there's another person, Zoe, who sort of wanted. So their protest was small, sporadic protests all over Victoria, and I'm sure across Australia, because of the lockdowns, so those were initial protests were not about the vaccine. Obviously, they were merely about the fact that this is unwarranted. And in fact, the mask became, I think, the first tipping point. The lockdowns per se did not lead to many protests because they started towards the end of March. April, May, June, people seemed to sort of, okay, let's live with this somehow. There weren't any protests, but from, I think, July onwards, when they imposed the mandatory masks outdoor policy, and that's the police, when they started enforcing, as I said, this woman wasn't wearing a mask and they choked her and so on. And in fact, they not only did that, they also, one police person came and hit another person, was walking, another somewhat not very, in good condition person. They hit the person with a moving car. So these incidents of police brutality led people to come out on the streets. Now, these things were also beginning to happen all over the world. These freedom protests, they were actually not just in Australia, they were part of a global movement, which had by the time started in Europe, for instance, and many other places against the lockdowns. So these people were feeding off each other. They were in touch with each other. There were young people. Harrison, for example, is one who's recently been arrested. He was one of the people who had been initially, organizing these Telegram groups and other things. In fact, I wasn't on Telegram, but he had been organizing on Facebook and so on. Initially, Facebook was quite okay. They were allowing these kind of things. And then, of course, that got banned. So the protest really started as a response to the policies. So they were relatively small initially. You're right about that. But then the police brutality started increasing. So in February 2020, I had attended one of these on that, I think 20th of February 2021. What am I saying? 2021 this year. I had attended a protest where they were around, at least I would argue, 3,000 to 4,000 people. This was Melbourne. This was not there was no lockdown at that stage. But what had happened by the time, the organizers said clearly that they would only let me speak if I was to say something against the vaccines and so on. So the vaccines had already come into play, and a lot of young people were very angry at the vaccines. So I oppose mandatory vaccines, and I went and said all those things. But the media started projecting these protests as anti-vaxxers. Now the vaccine has actually become the tipping point for a wider range of people joining in. So there were 3,000 people, as I said, in February. And that was there was no lockdown at that stage. There was just some kind of, requirement that you should socially distance when you're outside and you should wear masks and whatnot.
Yeah.
At that stage, I think the masks had been lifted for a short period of time. For some reason, there was no mask. I don't remember exactly, but I don't remember myself wearing a mask for that protest. And such things started happening. But after the policies of vaccinating people as part of their occupation, that's become, I think, the biggest issue, where the construction workers, as you saw, they're the ones who are saying, hey, the union, they went to the CFMEU, which is the union of the construction and manufacturing industry, whatever it's called. And out there, they had this big argument with their own union boss saying, why aren't you protecting us from these mandatory vaccines? So that's when things really turned pear-shaped for everybody. A fair bit of violence took place that day. that then led. So it was basically the truckies. Before that, I think end of August was the truckies, the truck drivers, who were being forced to do PCR tests and other such things while crossing borders and this and that, and they were, obviously getting significant issues with their occupations. So I think the initial protests were all about the young people who are just feeling frustrated about things and very unhappy and so on, and then joining a global movement. But then things started. It's like the pincers have been closing around the people, So the tyranny has been getting closer and closer home. You're losing your jobs, the nurses, the teachers, the people who work in the mines. So I've got so many groups. I'm a member of so many groups in Telegram where they've invited me to join and listen, and I don't get much time. But there are the people who have been oppressed by the big mining companies, which are global. Many of them owned in UK, but operated here. And these companies have done the same thing. They said that if you want to work in this in your job, you got to vaccinate yourself. And the people are saying that you haven't really asked us for our opinion on that, whether we want to do it. And they're basically asking for informed consent. They're saying we might vaccinate ourselves, but you can't be doing this kind of coercion. And of course, many people, I think, are talking about resigning if they are forced to do it. So this stuff is starting to hit home, and that's when when your food is going to be not available on the table, it's being removed from the table because of this. Then obviously you're pushing people to the wall, and that's actually the pressure is mounting even as we speak with the vaccine passports coming into place. Now you're going to have a situation where people who don't take the vaccines in Australia are soon going to not be able to participate in simple things like going to a restaurant. It's already happened in many countries in Europe, and some countries have lifted all these mandates. But the fact is, Australia is the pincers of the big state, the big brother state, are getting closer and closer. And in that, the people who are getting squished under this grip of the state, they are now starting to really come out and protest. However, as they protest, the state is getting even stronger and harsher. And what we're seeing now is the kind of brutality that is probably getting very close to what we see with communist China and their tyranny within their own country, or in Hong Kong, for instance. So and those images are going all over the world. They are creating a bit of waves. Governor DeSantis of Florida really said that this looks like a communist. This would be part of a communist country. What's going on? And he condemned this yesterday, or day before yesterday. There were some press people who asked Scott Morrison, who had recently been to the USA, to sign a nuclear sub deal with the UK, Australia, and USA, and that and Morrison really said to these guys, hey, he tried to shrug this whole thing off and said, we are actually different societies. We're not the same. I mean, what is he talking about? I called him a mealy-mouthed person. He's basically saying that the Australians are not part of the Western civilization. We don't really care for freedom in Australia. It's only you guys who, care about freedom and so on. You ask such questions because actually the media in Australia never asks a single question about these things. The most remarkable thing about this thing is that it is the media in Australia that wants more of these things. And I think I shared this little chart, which is why does the media want it? Because the people want it. And the people are so afraid and hysterical and in panic mode with this COVID thing, that they are willing to have the complete elimination of freedom just to keep themselves safe. So the media responds to the people. It's actually a vicious cycle. The media caused the panic among the people by exaggerating everything. The people got into panic mode. The media loves to create panic because they get eyeballs. Once the people got into panic mode, the media would not publish things. For example, from me, the Australian didn't publish some very straightforward thing that I had said, but I had to publish elsewhere because they didn't want to stop the hysteria. It's the golden goose or whatever, that's just giving them as much money as they want with the advertising and eyeballs and everything. So why would they want to stop it? So it's become a terrible vicious cycle in Australia where the people want more and more tyranny. And I've actually had personal experience of talking to so many people who want Australia's borders to be closed, not just for a short time. The word they use, permanently. They want Australia's borders to be closed permanently. There are so many people there. You'll be astonished, because they say that we are far away from everybody. We don't need anybody. We just have some trade and ships and other things, and we don't need people coming in and out. We just stay separately.
That's quite scary. The permanently
Absolutely.
thing, and that
It is a
yeah,
permanently.
that's weird. So I've been like putting up some of the videos and stuff, just because I think it's important for people to realize here that we aren't talking about some. I don't want to exaggerate here. Like, I don't want this to be the case. I don't want to be looking at the onset of some sort of tyranny in the modern world. I don't want to see that, especially in like a developed nation. That's not what I want to see at all. And it's really concerning to me that that's where we're kind of at with some of this stuff. So I've been pulling up some of the videos, but I just wanted to go through some more of them just sort of briefly, because I think it's important that we look at like what we're seeing. So I showed this one already. I know you can't quite see them, but so this is a woman walking on the beach with no mask, and there's like 10 police officers with her, and
Yes.
but this is repeated in all of the other
Yes.
examples that I've seen. There's one here that I'm going to pull up here and go forward to where, they start to arrest him. And there's like one man outside, and they've got like 6 police officers all like taking him in. Then there's a few examples of just anytime someone is arrested or taken down, it's in huge numbers. And it's really scary that this is just sort of accepted. One of the ones that I wanted to show was this. There's a guy who's like getting tackled into his car door by like 3 or 4 police, and the one guy comes in, like,
Yes, I've
slams
seen
him
that,
in the
yes.
face, and then like
Yes,
later on in
absolutely.
the video, if you like fast forward a little bit through, then the police officers who are still being filmed, like just they go up, and then here it is, they just kick him in the face. They literally
Yes,
just come
they-
in and kick the guy in the face,
Yes.
and then they turn around like mad at the people filming, as if, what are you doing? Like, how dare you film this?
Yes.
So I'm trying to give people an idea that this isn't all just like people being crazy. There's another video here from inside a shopping mall, where a guy gets like just taken from behind and thrown to the ground like face first. It's really disturbing for me to see this in what's meant to be like a Western, or not even Western. I don't like that word because it's just not very useful. Like, west from where? But like,
No,
the
it's actually
developed
a
world.
correct. It's a correct term to use for what is a different kind of a civilization with different assumptions. So that's okay.
Yeah. But basically, I can't believe that we're seeing this happening. So what has the reaction been in Australia to this? Like, what have been the reaction to the protests and to
Well, if you look at
the police brutality? Like, has there been any like opinions changed or hardened in this respect?
No. It's actually quite interesting that if you look at the Twitter feeds or Facebook where somebody posts these kind of things, you look at the comments from the average person. They say, why were these people out there? They should have followed the rules. They're basically blaming the people. The vast majority of Australians are very much against these guys. They think the police are absolutely on the right side. The popularity of Dan Andrews, who's the guy who's running the state of Victoria, is sky high, absolutely sky high. He is, Chairman Dan or whatever you call him, but he's actually very popular. The media is obviously very supportive. There's 1 or 2 sporadic voices among the institutions, like the other day, a fair work commissioner, kind of an organization that looks after the industrial relations and wage agreements in Australia. One of the commissioners, they're actually this is about a mandatory vaccine thing, and one of them said, why are we doing this kind of things? But the human rights commissioners, very rarely they call out this thing. Nobody really seems to bother. The other day, these protesters went to the shrine. The shrine is a place where they commemorate the people, the Anzacs and others who fought in the World War I and II and so on. and that's a very kind of a sacred place for everybody in Australia. And the protesters were driven to that place because they were not allowed to hang around in the city. So they were driven by the police to that place. So when they go there, the police beat them up further. And then the people are complaining, including the RSL, which is the Returned Soldiers League, complaining, why are these guys coming and desecrating this shrine? So what we've seen is the vast majority of the institutions and the media and the people are very much against the protesters. They're very much, the commentary is very much against them. And so has anyone's mind changed from this? I really don't think so. I think most people have simply hardened their position, and it's basically become them versus us. So there are two kinds of people, and that's actually getting further hardened with the vaccine passport thing that we are seeing develop as we speak. So yeah, it's a situation which is very sort of reminds us of the things that happen in obviously in the Germany is the recent example we can think about in the World War I, where the groups were segregated. The society started getting segregated in terms of certain groups, and then it just progressed from one to the other next step. And I don't know about how far this goes, but I can definitely say that the split has become quite hard. And at the moment, there are just these two groups of people head on facing each other, but the majority, the vast majority, is the one that wants more lockdowns, wants more mandates, is very keen for the vaccines, of course, but also keen for the vaccine passport. So this is a pretty dangerous situation for the people who are living in Australia at the moment, who think of a thing known at one time called freedom, just the basic freedom to breathe, because you cannot breathe in Australia anymore. You've got to wear a mask if you go outside. You cannot walk because you can only go for up to 5 kilometers from your home. And there are curfews on top of that. And on top of that, very soon you will not be able to shop and so on. Yeah. It's pretty bad.
Yeah. I mean, I can't believe we're at this point. So there's a fantastic book that I am currently reading. It's called Why Nations Fail. I'm going to be interviewing both of the authors separately over the next couple of weeks, which will be released soon. And the basic thesis of their book is nations fail because they lack freedom. So they talk about pluralism and the need for inclusive economic and political institutions, but basically what it comes down to is people's not being under some sort of oppressive or extractive political or economic regime. And what I am concerned that we're witnessing is the start of that kind of world where we've had 50, 60 years or so of increasing freedom and lessening violence, increased prosperity, and just the ability for humans to sort of make the world what they wish it to be in terms of like your individual potential. And I'm watching all of these things disappear, and it concerns me so much that not even that we're watching it happen, because there's no long arc of progress. It's not like we're not moving ever better towards this beautiful utopian end goal. But what we do have is a system that I think deserves to be protected in terms of there's a lot of corruption. Like, I'm very familiar with that, and some really horrendous things going on within the system. But that doesn't mean it's not a good thing that it's given us so much, and I'm concerned that people don't realize what they're sort of clamoring to have taken away. Do you know what I mean?
You're absolutely right. In fact, that's the topic of all my work for the last many decades. The need for good governance, and what you just mentioned is, despite its levels of corruption here and there, the Western models of governance, of accountability, the independence of the judiciary, the legislature, the executive, these three pillars of the government, and the press, they have held us in some form or shape into a point where, despite the disputes that always occur and should occur within the free society, there is a little bit of a movement towards the benefit of the people at the bottom of the ladder. So the poorer have always been benefiting overall with technology or with more income. It is the first time, I think, this is the most self-inflicted kind of a wound the Western civilization has inflicted on itself, where the poor, the interesting thing is that inequality has dramatically increased all over the world, and the poor have suffered the most. They are the ones who do these. So who runs these retail shops and so on, the essential things? They are the young people at a low level of income. Okay, they are the ones who've been running around grinding this whole thing, and these nurses and so on in NHS, and also nurses here. And these are the young people who've given their last 1 or 2 years to serve the community, and these are the ones that are actually protesting. Many of them, because they're the ones who are going to lose their jobs. So what we're seeing is a society where, and if you look at the overall data, you should be talking to, if you note down a guy called Paul Fridgers. Paul Fridgers is a professor of economics in the London School of Economics, and he's got a fantastic book called The Great COVID Panic. And I'm actually, I wrote a little bit for that book as well. But what he's talking about is the complete, the underpinnings of this is basically in social psychology. It's all over the world. It's not just Australia. It's just that Australia is probably the most extreme example of what's happened. Mm-hmm. But the UK has not been particularly less they maybe didn't have this police atrocities, but the overall tyranny was pretty strong with the lockdowns, and the deaths, etc., the extra deaths have happened because of lockdowns all over the world, including the UK. So what we've seen is a groupthink. People fell into a state of panic, and that's why the Great COVID Panic. And my book is The Great Hysteria. And so once people fall into panic, then their brain stops working in terms of saying what's really the rational thing in this situation, and therefore nobody has been paying attention in these countries, in the so-called Western countries, to basic arithmetic. So you can look at the data, and that you can look at data from any way, which way you cut it and slice it, and it is simply a very, very minor pandemic by any benchmark on Earth. And if that's the case, the fact that people have overreacted and now they're entering into the vicious cycle where they're now further and further inward looking. They're starting to hate. The word hate is coming in. The so-called anti-vaxxers, in this case, they call them anti-vaxxers, by the way. If you are pro-choice, you are called an anti-vaxxer by these guys. So, it's like criminalizing the fact that, so you hate all vaccines. No, but these are the guys who've taken vaccines all their lives. They've taken the vaccines right from their birth, and they would take vaccines without a problem. What they don't want is a vaccine that's not been demonstrated to work and so on. Of course, there's some evidence coming in now, but they want the freedom of choice to decide. And what's now stopping is precipitating this entire anger in Australia, and I'm sure in many parts of the world, is the fact that they're being coerced. And if they don't do that, then they're going to lose their job. And that's, by the way, not just Australia. It's happening all over the world. So we are seeing the Western civilization implode because people have gone into a state of panic and hysteria. And there is simply, it's going to take a long time, let's say. That's what Paul Fridger's assessment. It says it could take a very long time for people to get back to normal.
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to take... I don't even understand the path back to normal at this point, which is something that concerns me, because I just this is not, and I hate that I have to qualify everything I say now, but I'm not saying that COVID has not caused pain for people. I'm not saying that people haven't died from it. I'm not saying that people haven't lost loved ones, that there aren't people with long COVID, but this is something that Jordan Peterson made the point a few days ago in an article or in an interview with The Telegraph, and he was talking about when something becomes. He was talking about climate change, but the point applies here, and he says when something becomes such a monstrous existential crisis that it enables or it justifies almost any action.
Yes, that's what it is. Indeed, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly right.
It's
yes.
when something
it's an existing. These people are afraid of dying. You cross them on the streets, and they'll go away from you. They all sort of signals that they send to you about their panic, and at this stage, vast majority think that they're going to die. But actually, in fact, the interesting thing is if you look at the numbers of people who think about, they've been asked about what's the actual death rate from COVID. Some people are talking about 10% and so on. Actually, 0.1%. So when you're looking at the actual, in fact, it's less than 0.1%. I've actually got you can do a very simple calculation and get it out. 2 million out of 7,800 million. What's the number? That's the number who died in 2020, which is actually a bit more than they died. And 7,800 is the total number of people on the planet. 2 out of 7,800 is less than 1%, less than 0.1%. So we're looking at people exaggerating the threat by about probably about 100 times or more at the minimum. And then and what they've done, therefore, is to get so afraid and they cannot think anymore. It's an existential crisis for them. How do they get out of this? I think you're absolutely right. There is simply no known example of such mass scale hysteria at a level where 70 to 80% of the population is dead scared. There's no known example of this sort, anything in history.
I mean, it doesn't mean that it's impossible to get back to some sort of reasonableness, but I think it takes, or it's going to take, some level of admission that people have, got too crazy. I guess I try to just talk to people as best I can. Like that's all I can really do is try and be like,
it's not going to happen, Josh. It's not going to happen. I'll tell you why. Because the so-called experts, and I'm reading this kind of stuff daily, and you're reading as well, they're continuously aggravating the situation. For example, fake and absolutely rubbish kind of studies have just come out alleging that masks save a lot of people's, that they reduce the spread. So now they want masks to be a regular part of human. Everybody should be wearing masks no matter whether you're vaccinated. It's going to be forever. This is the so-called experts who've taken over the conversation. The media only gives these people the voice. They are putting out false, fake, and utterly nonsensical pieces of work or claims that are not being filtered by the media, and they're going straight into the people's head. The people out there are listening to them. They're not listening to you and me. Okay, I can guarantee that this video, whatever we are talking, will be listened to by a very small percentage of the world population. But the kind of rubbish that comes out from the mouths of people like Anthony Fauci and all the other crazy experts, so-called experts, who are spouting complete rubbish and nonsense for the last 1.5 years, that is heard by hundreds of millions of people every day. So there is no hope really effectively of countering this with any rationality, because when I go and tell people that, hey, there is no evidence that masks really work. I've looked at all the actual studies, the Danish study, the Bangladesh study, and there's so much amount of other information that I published in my own, complaint to the International Criminal Court and so on. There is no evidence that absolutely the masks work, and the cloth masks do not work at all. The surgical masks might work, but for a short period, if you wear them well. The N95 will definitely help a lot, but then you cannot breathe after more than half an hour. So what do you think people tell me when I say this? People say, no, but there are these experts who are telling us that this thing works. It's very important to wear masks. So people have bought into the theory that this is the biggest pandemic since the plague, the Black Death. They bought into that story. Or as big as the Spanish flu. They bought into the idea that masks save, people. They bought into the idea that lockdowns are very important to save, lives. And so once they bought into this kind of story, it's like saying they believe the earth is flat or round, whatever way you look at it. But once you have a belief, right? They don't ever ask a question. When did this ever happen before? When did we do lockdowns ever before? They're not going to look at the numbers. So this generation has actually got programmed. It's called conditioning. It's called brain programming. It's like in 1984 and the Brave New World, these people have actually their brain has been completely rewired to think about things not the way they are, but the way they've been told.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you can, unprogram these peoples, because there's no known example, as far as I know. It's like once they become a cult, it's like a cult. That's why Paul Fridges calls this a cult, and many other people call it a cult, COVID cult. Completely brand new ideas have been thrown around. People have not asked a single question. They've just grabbed at everything. They also don't care whether the goalposts are moving every day. So they're constantly moving the goalposts. The vaccines, no, it's 2, it's not 2, it's 3, it's 4, it's 5. It's constantly moving, but people are willing to accept anything because they're terrorized. So this has become 100% like a cult. The only problem here is that normally a cult has only got about 1,000 people or 5,000 people, in the whole world. And we can live with that fringe out there. But this is now the overwhelming majority in a place like Australia, which is, I think, the worst example of all of this. But in all other parts of the West as well, it would be probably in the range of 40 to 50% of the population are COVID cultists now.
Yeah. I mean, do you know, you'll maybe laugh at this, actually. So I was thinking about this the other day when I was sitting in a restaurant, and I saw, or in a bar, restaurant place. Anyway, so I saw some people come in with their masks on, sit down, take them off, and get up, put the mask on to go to the toilet, sit down again. They got up to go to the counter, mask back on, and just the sort of on and off thing. And I was laughing because I used to say that I didn't think the social constructionists were right in their belief that humans were so malleable. But then I was like, how could we be convinced to do all this and sort of have like these habits set in so quickly if we aren't like this malleable in a way? I was kind of chuckling to myself about how
it's Pavlovian.
Yeah,
it's Pavlovian. Absolutely. So what you've done is you've terrorized these people. You've said that if you don't do this, you're going to die, and they believe that, and so they don't see the illogic or the irrationality of eating without the mask and getting up and putting the mask in. If they don't see the logic of anything anymore, they've stopped thinking at all. They're behaving like what actually is known as the lizard brain, our primitive reptilian brain, where we never actually think at that stage about what we're doing. We just operate. So you can condition animals, because they don't have the cerebrum that we have and the frontal cortex. You can actually program them pretty easily to do practically anything. Okay, so what we're seeing now, I need you to wrap this up in the next 15 minutes. I have a Zoom meeting. I can't talk to the people there. So okay. Wind this up. Okay. Yeah, we're going to finish it up in 15 minutes at the most. Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. No problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically the situation is that the Pavlovian conditioning that's been going on of the human beings in the form of primitive human being. I think this is what Paul Fridges talks about, the social psychology. He says we've forgotten social psychology, and we better go back and start reading up on social psychology, because this is nothing but massive groupthink and group terror. And so we don't know how to get out of it. Really, nobody knows how to get out of it. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm constantly trying to think, because, I mean, part of the conversations I've been having with a lot of people of late is just trying to understand how we escape from this. And it's described in that book, Why Nations Fail. It's a vicious circle of institutions becoming more extractive, taking more power, and we're like circling the drain in terms of certain nations remaining the prosperous places that they are. And that's not just because of COVID. I mean, I think a lot of these things have been coming a long time in terms of the conditions that have allowed this to become the mad thing that it has, if that makes sense. Like the divisions that we've built in society have been coming a long time, especially the economic ones. And this just seems like another step along the way of the extractive institutions in our society taking more power than they should have in an ideal system. And essentially what I think we're witnessing is a power grab by dividing society. And coming from Northern Ireland, so where I'm from, is we've witnessed that this country has been absolutely torn apart by divisions based on nothing, that like based on just absolute nonsense, like because you're born in a specific part, or you believe you're British or Irish, or you believe you're in one part of the, or one interpretation of the Bible, like Catholicism versus Protestantism. And I've witnessed what that does to places. Like I've seen it happen, and I still see the hangover of that years later here. Like when we're meant to have been at peace for 23 years. The Good Friday Agreement was signed in 1998. That was meant to be it. Underscore the troubles. We're done. And you can still see all of the legacy of that division, and I'm still maybe like unreasonably so optimistic that we can perhaps find a way to remember that we're all just people, and we can love each other, and everything will be better.
Look, I think the good thing, the positive thing in this situation is that a good proportion of the population have resisted from the very beginning. It's not a very small proportion. I would argue it's about 15 to 20% of Australia's population do not like these things. And I'm assuming that's where change comes from ultimately, because this resistance that is happening right now, political resistance and protests on the streets, and conversations that are happening in Telegram and other places, which are basically because Twitter has shut down everybody. Facebook has shut down everybody. I get banned from Facebook all the time. LinkedIn, of course, has banned me as well. So, but that means that there are these conversations happening in that 20% of the world's population, and these people aren't giving up anytime soon. Let me tell you that. So, the hope is not lost, and we cannot obviously sit back and say nothing's going to happen. We obviously need to keep on working on that project, keeping in mind that human beings are what they are. And they're not going to change simply by through rational argument. So it's going to be quite a challenge to get the society to shift from the panic and fear and hysteria and terror and tyranny that we're starting to see in the so-called advanced Western developed countries. So it's a very challenging exercise, and I think the church has fallen in the trap as well, with the Pope and the Catholic, they're basically starting to impose the same conditions of mandatory vaccines, etc., within the Vatican. And essentially now the church is a part of the problem. There is no concept of, what you call love and all these things that you're talking about. No, there's none of that. No, the church is quite happy to segregate people. The church itself is now part of the problem, global problem. And that's also been the case during Nazi Germany. We know the church was potentially, it was divided, with some parts of it supporting Hitler. So what we now see is that all institutions, including the religious institutions, have failed. And so the fight back is going to be very long and very difficult, is my guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you're probably right. But I was trying to make this point actually to someone earlier, that people are always trying to find like utopia. They're trying to get themselves to this wonderful state with a system that's just totally going to work forever and will never be corrupted. And the idea is I think a little bit antithetical to that. Like, of reality is that yes, we should seek to strive a system that shouldn't be exploited, that shouldn't be taken over by tyrannical people or people who become tyrannical. That the idea is that we build a system and then we have to defend it. And I think we've been not defending it and not making the case for things like freedom of speech or the importance of protest, or a lot of the values of the Enlightenment to our own detriment, because we've all forgotten why they're important. And I guess for me, that's where this will end. But the last thing I want to kind of ask you is, do you expect to see any reaction from the international community if this continues in Australia, or do you think it's just going to be the same sort of silence aside from
I seriously doubt it, because there is, I mean, there was this Governor DeSantis, criticizing Australia yesterday or day before yesterday, and there are a couple of commentators here and there on I think in the television in Australia, and sorry, in USA, and a couple of write-ups here and there. I think Zero Hedge today, for example, that are very critical of what's happening in Australia. However, self-interest, because all of these guys, including Boris Johnson, Biden, and whatnot, they were complicit in almost 99% of the things that are happening in Australia. They were completely supportive of the lockdowns. They were completely supportive of masks. Now, Boris Johnson had himself got COVID. He's got all the possible antibodies and everything, but he's the one who's, you see, wearing a mask all the time. And I mean, the guy is absolutely stark raving mad. And when you have these people really talking to each other, Johnson and Biden and Morrison, they're basically birds of the same feather. I do not therefore expect any of them to criticize Australia in a significant way. So no, this is not going to happen. The International Criminal Court, by the way, my complaint to them, I lodged a complaint. I don't know whether you were aware of that.
Mm-hmm. We spoke about it last time.
They sat on it for 7 months and basically did nothing. And they are the only international organization that can easily say that these are international, there's some complete abuse of human rights and crimes against humanity, because what's happening is terror and fear created by the state. But they are keeping quiet as well. So no, I think the answer is no, because when groupthink happens, everyone is looking at their own personal career, okay? And they're saying, if I say something, what's going to happen to me? And they don't want to be the first person, they don't want to lose their jobs. No, it's not going to happen.
Well, hopefully there is still hope. I mean, we're hoping for hope. That makes you a bit desperate at that point. But I guess it's, we'll wait and see what happens. And I will continue to say when I think things are wrong. And I guess that's all that, you can ask people to do is, if they see something they believe is not right, say something, basically.
I mean, so far we are not yet into the situation of communist China. And so we still have the right to say and to have these kind of conversations. And sometimes YouTube might allow them and sometimes they don't. But you got to keep doing what you can.
Yeah. Well, that's all we can do. But anyway, Sanjeev, I wanna thank you a lot. It was a pleasure to get to chat. Therapeutic in a way for myself, hopefully for some people listening. Talk
to Paul. I really recommend talking to Paul, because he actually has studied this social psychology very well. And in one of his interviews that I heard, he actually explained this much better than I can.
Okay.
Yes.
I will definitely check him out. Paul Friedgers, you said?
Yes, Friedgers, London School of Economics.
Okay.
Yes.
I will. Yeah, I've got a note of the name. I will definitely check that out. So yeah, keep an eye out for that, everyone. I will put links for your book and your website, blog, in the description below for everyone. So thanks very much.
Thank you.